Her mother-in-law faked her death. You won't believe the shocking twists and betrayals Zubena faced as she fought for her life and love. Just when you thought it was over, a devastating truth was exposed that shook Ngariba City to its core. Stay tuned, because the real story is about to begin. In the heart of Ngariba City, where luxury cars hummed down marble-paved roads and buildings kissed the clouds, Zubena's name was slowly becoming a household brand. From her small workshop in the back streets of Mboli district, she had stitched her way into the world of high fashion. Elegant, hard-working, and humble, her designs had been worn by actresses, politicians' wives, and even international guests. She never chased fame. It came to her. But when Oromo Bakari, the only son of billionaire Barumo Bakari, appeared at her fashion showcase and sat front row without saying a word, something shifted. He didn't speak to her that night, but 2 weeks later, he was in her workshop, buying designs and smiling like a man already in love. Their relationship moved fast. The press ate it up. Bakari Empire heir engaged to fashion queen, the headlines read. People loved the fairy tale idea, a self-made woman being chosen by royalty-level wealth. But at the Zenith Gala, where Oromo got on one knee in front of Ngariba's richest and proposed with a diamond ring worth 2 luxury homes, not every face in the crowd held admiration. Lulena, Oromo's mother, stood in the front row, her face frozen behind expensive makeup. She clapped slowly, mechanically, her designer clutch gripped tightly in her hand. To outsiders, she looked proud, even emotional. But to those who knew her, the staff, the close friends, it was clear. That tight smile was not joy. Later that night, Lulena sat with her old friend, sipping golden wine as cameras flashed outside. She leaned in and whispered, "She's clever, but not clever enough for me." Her tone was calm, almost amused. Her friend laughed, but nervously. Everyone in Ngariba knew Lulena didn't lose. To the public, the Bakaris were accepting Zubena. Articles showed the couple holding hands, smiling, shopping. But inside the Bakari mansion, a storm was already gathering. Lulena had plans that didn't include a girl from the back streets, no matter how famous she had become. In her world, bloodline mattered, legacy mattered. Zubena, to her, was just a passing shadow in her son's life, a distraction she would erase. And so, while the city cheered for the wedding of the century to come, behind velvet curtains and private meetings, the real story was just beginning. A story not of love, but of envy, control, and a mother's secret war against the woman her son dared to love. A war that would soon turn deadly. Lulena Bakari had spent her whole life building an image, one of elegance, control, and power. She didn't just marry into wealth, she managed it like a queen managing a kingdom. To her, legacy wasn't just about money, it was about blood, name, and influence. That's why she had spent years carefully choosing the kind of woman her son should marry. Someone from a respected lineage, someone who could stand beside the Bakari name without raising eyebrows. But Zubena, a fashion designer from the back streets of Mboli, to Lulena, that was unacceptable. Out in public, she played the role perfectly. She smiled in photos with Zubena, praised her dresses in interviews, and even sent her flowers on her birthday. But behind closed doors, her heart boiled with quiet hatred. She didn't scream or shout. Lulena was too refined for that. She was a strategist, calm, dangerous. She's a phase, she told herself while sipping tea in her sunlit veranda. And phases end. Her assistant, Noma, tried to stay out of it. But one afternoon, while Lulena reviewed charity invitations, she looked up and said quietly, "She will leave on her own, when I'm done with her." Her voice was smooth, chilling, like she wasn't planning a breakup, but an execution. Noma didn't reply. She had seen this look in Lulena's eyes before, when a business partner betrayed her, when a relative tried to challenge her authority, and each time, Lulena had destroyed them without ever raising her voice. It started small, anonymous whispers in the society circle, stories planted in gossip blogs. Did you know Zubena once begged outside a boutique? She used to copy other designers' work. Oromo deserves better. Nothing directly linked to Lulena, but the damage began to seep through the glitter. Then came the subtle, emotional attacks. She'd invite Oromo to sudden family events, ones Zubena wasn't ready for. She'd mention how exhausting it was explaining Zubena's past to the family elders. In private, she told Oromo that love was blinding him, that one day he'd regret giving up status for sentiment. "You're a Bakari," she reminded him. "Act like one." But her real weapon wasn't gossip or pressure. It was control. She began interfering in wedding plans, changed venues, swapped caterers, suggested stylists who would elevate Zubena's look. Each move made Zubena feel like a guest at her own wedding, and still, Lulena smiled, posed, and pretended to be supportive. But deep down, she was watching, calculating, waiting for Zubena to crack, to walk away humiliated. Because in Lulena's world, battles weren't fought with fists. They were won with silence, strategy, and a perfectly timed smile. When Zubena moved into the Bakari mansion, it was supposed to be a dream. But the moment she stepped through those towering gates, it felt more like a test. The house was beautiful, grand chandeliers, golden staircases, and endless hallways, but the warmth was missing. The staff barely greeted her. Some looked at her with pity, others with silent judgment. And though she smiled and remained graceful, Zubena felt the coldness wrap around her like a heavy coat. It started subtly. On the first night, her dinner never arrived. She waited patiently, thinking it was just a mix-up. But when she went down to the kitchen, the chef looked surprised and mumbled, "I wasn't told you'd be eating." The next day, the same thing happened. On the third day, she prepared tea for herself in silence, while the rest of the house dined in luxury. Her assigned room kept changing. First, she was given a spacious suite near the garden. Then, suddenly, she was moved to a smaller room near the back corridor. No explanation, no apology. She accepted it quietly, folding her dresses with care. But the final blow came when she opened her wardrobe one morning and found it completely empty. Her custom-made dresses, each stitched with love and hard work, were gone. She rushed to the housekeeper. "Where are my clothes?" she asked, her voice low but shaken. "Oh," the woman said, avoiding eye contact. "Madame Lulena said they were old designs. She donated them to charity." Zubena couldn't speak. Her chest felt tight. Those dresses weren't just fabric. They were her art, her identity. And now they were gone, just like that, without a word. But she didn't scream. She didn't cause a scene. She just stood there, breathing slowly, holding back tears. When Aromo visited, everything changed. Suddenly, the chef remembered her meals. The room was cleaned. A new bouquet was placed by her bedside. Lulena would welcome her with a kiss on the cheek, asking if she was settling in well. She played her role perfectly, loving, generous, innocent. And Aromo believed it. He never saw the cold glares from the maids when his back was turned. He never noticed how Zubena's smile didn't reach her eyes anymore. She tried to tell him once, but his response was gentle and dismissive. "My mother is trying," he said. "Just give her time." So Zubena stayed quiet. She buried her pain. She worked on her wedding sketches late into the night, pouring her frustration into lace and silk. The mansion wasn't her home. It was a battlefield, and she was surviving in silence, hoping love would be enough to melt the ice around her. But deep inside, she was beginning to wonder, how long could she last in a house where even the walls seemed to whisper that she didn't belong? It started like any normal evening. The family had gathered for dinner in the grand dining room. The air was filled with soft music, and the table was set with gold-rimmed plates. Lulena sat at the head of the table, dressed in ivory silk, calm as ever. Then suddenly, she clutched her chest and gasped. Her fork fell to the floor. She dropped to the ground, shaking. The room exploded in panic. Aromo rushed to her side, screaming for help. Zubena froze in shock, her heart racing. Within minutes, doctors arrived. They examined her, whispering with serious faces, nodding gravely. Then came the news. She has an untreatable heart disease. It's rare. Aggressive. Aromo broke down. Zubena cried beside him. Everything felt too sudden, too cruel. Lulena was moved to a private wing of the mansion. Day after day she grew weaker, or at least appeared to. Her voice became softer, her hands colder. Visitors were limited. Only Aromo was allowed in regularly. Zubena tried to bring comfort. She offered soup, sat at her bedside, even stitched a soft blanket. But Lulena barely looked at her, and when she did, her eyes held no warmth, just quiet triumph. A month passed. Then, one quiet morning, the housekeeper came to Zubena's room with trembling lips. "She's gone," she whispered. Zubena fell to her knees, her chest heavy with guilt and sorrow. Aromo didn't speak for hours. His mother, the woman who raised him, shaped him, loved him, was gone. But the mourning was strange. There was no funeral, no gathering, just a quick private cremation arranged by the family lawyer. When Zubena asked why, Aromo said, It was her final wish. She didn't want a fuss. But the real shock came a week later. The will was read in the presence of the lawyer, Aromo and Zubena. The mood was tense, the air thick. Then, line by line, the truth unfolded. Lulena had left specific instructions. Her estate, her shares in the Bakari Empire, and control of the family foundation were not going to Aromo, not yet. Instead, they were being placed in the hands of a temporary guardian who would evaluate Zubena's role in the family over the next 6 months. If she proves worthy, the will stated, the legacy continues. If not, everything returns to the Bakari name. Without her, Zubena's mouth went dry. Aromo stared at the page in disbelief. It was a trap, one last test from beyond the grave. And though Lulena's body had been reduced to ashes, her control was still alive, wrapped in legal words and impossible expectations. The house grew even colder after that. Zubena realized, Lulena may be gone, but the real storm had just begun. Just days after the first will was read, a second document surfaced. Delivered in a sleek black envelope and handed directly to the family lawyer, it bore Lulena's signature, neat, cold, confident. Aromo read it aloud, his voice cracking halfway through. The room was silent, every word landing like a blow. If Zubena wishes to marry my son, it read, she must first abandon her family, sign over full ownership of her fashion company to the Bakari Group, and publicly declare her loyalty to the Bakari legacy. Zubena's heart dropped. The words felt unreal. Her company was her life's work, built from scratch, stitch by stitch, long before Aromo ever walked into her life. Her family, though poor, had given her everything: love, values, strength. And now she was being asked to throw it all away. In exchange for what? A marriage tied to control, not love. She looked at Aromo, hoping he would tear the paper in half, laugh it off, or say it was fake. But he was silent, his eyes full of pain. Maybe it's just a test, he said gently. Maybe it's temporary. We can fix it later. Zubena shook her head slowly. You want me to give up my name, my family, my dreams, for a seat at a table that never wanted me? Aromo tried to reach for her hand, but she pulled away. Her heart was breaking, but her pride stood tall. She had sacrificed too much already. She had been insulted, ignored, erased inside that mansion. But this was the final cut. With tears in her eyes, she stood, lifted her purse from the couch, and whispered, if I have to stop being me to be your wife, then maybe I'm not the right one. Aromo followed her to the door, pleading with soft words, asking her to think it over. But Zubena didn't look back. The gates of the Bakari estate closed behind her, not with anger, but with clarity. She had loved Aromo deeply, but she loved herself more. Outside, the city lights of Ngariba twinkled in the distance. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she knew she wouldn't trade her soul for anyone's approval. She walked away from the mansion, from the wealth, from the pressure. And in doing so, she walked towards something even greater, her truth. As the wedding date approached, whispers filled the city. First, it was just a postponement. Lulena's passing, they said. The family needs time. But then, the news dropped like a bomb. Aromo was marrying someone else. A new bride, Niela, elegant, polished, and daughter of a powerful ally to the Bakaris. The headlines changed overnight. Photos of Niela and Aromo appeared on every gossip page, smiling, posing, glowing with wealth. People began asking questions. Where was Zubena? Why wasn't she saying anything? Was she hurt, angry, embarrassed? But Zubena had disappeared, completely. No one knew where she had gone. Her shop was closed, her apartment emptied, her phone off. Even her closest friends had no idea. She hadn't posted a single word, not one picture, not even a goodbye. That silence made room for cruelty. Social media turned cold. She was only after the money, one post read. Classic gold digger story, another said. Girl gets close, can't seal the deal, vanishes. Influencers made content about her downfall. Fashion pages unfollowed her. Some claimed she had moved abroad in shame. Others said she'd been paid off to leave quietly. But in all the noise, Zubena's silence grew louder. She didn't defend herself. She didn't try to correct the rumors. She simply vanished, as if she had never existed. The Bakaris, meanwhile, threw themselves into wedding preparations once more. Niela fit perfectly into their circle, elegant in pearls, fluent in power games. Lulena's final wish was now being honored, or so it seemed. Guests were invited, flowers ordered, Paparazzi lined up outside the mansion gates. Oromo rarely spoke about Zubena. He acted like the past never happened, but those close to him noticed his smile didn't reach his eyes anymore. Something was missing, but no one dared ask. Behind the glamorous headlines and designer suits, one truth remained. Zubena had loved deeply, been betrayed quietly, and disappeared without a trace. What the world didn't know was that her silence wasn't weakness. It was the calm before something none of them were ready for. And while Ngariba City danced toward another high society wedding, far away from the lights, Zubena was watching, waiting, and planning. The chandeliers sparkled over the grand ballroom of the Bakari estate. Journalists crowded outside the gates. Inside, everything was perfect. Music floated through the air, soft and elegant. Niela stood at the entrance, a vision in white. Oromo, dressed in custom-made ivory robes, waited at the altar with a tense smile. The crowd whispered, the press clicked photos, and the ceremony was about to begin. The Bakaris had spared no expense. This was the wedding the city had waited for. But just as the officiant lifted his book, the doors at the back of the ballroom creaked open. At first, no one looked. Then someone gasped. Heads turned, hands flew to mouths. Walking down the marble aisle, alive and well, was Lulena Bakari. Not in a wheelchair, not frail. She walked with the grace of a queen, wearing a dark emerald gown and a calm, confident smile. Her eyes scanned the room as if nothing was out of place. The music stopped. The officiant stammered. Niela looked confused, Oromo's face drained of colour. He whispered, "Mother." She stepped forward slowly, each step echoing louder than the last. "I'm not dead," she said loud enough for all to hear. "And this wedding shouldn't be happening." The room went completely silent. Oromo didn't move. He was frozen in disbelief. The woman he'd mourned, cried for, cremated, was now standing in front of him. Niela's father stood up. "Is this some kind of joke?" he shouted. Lulena simply smiled. "No joke, just a truth long overdue." Cameras clicked, videos streamed live, social media lit up. The woman who had died a month ago had returned on her son's wedding day, looking like she'd just returned from vacation. The tension in the room could be sliced with a knife. Zubena, somewhere far away, watched the live stream with calm eyes. She had known. Somehow she had always known. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Lulena didn't explain anything that day. She didn't have to. Her presence alone flipped the entire wedding into chaos. Guests whispered, alliances cracked, and Oromo's world shattered again. Whatever joy the Bakaris had tried to build, whatever lies they had told, were now unraveling in front of all Ngariba, and the story was just starting to explode. The room was still reeling from Lulena's unexpected return when the sound of heavy footsteps echoed through the silence. The doors to the ballroom flew open with a force that sent everyone's gaze snapping toward them. There, in the doorway, stood Zubena. She was a vision in a glowing red gown from her new luxury fashion line, Zu Royal. The gown shimmered with every step she took, as if it was made of pure light. Her presence was magnetic, an undeniable force. The guests, who had been whispering in shock, fell silent once again, their attention now fully on her. Zubena was no longer the quiet, unseen woman. She was a queen in her own right. Behind her, a small group entered, walking with purpose. The real Bakari family lawyer, 2 uniformed police officers, and several journalists holding cameras ready to capture every moment. Zubena raised her hand, and in one swift motion, the crowd parted to make room for her. She walked straight up to the front, facing the stunned faces of the Bakaris and Oromo, who was still frozen at the altar. "Play the footage," Zubena commanded, her voice firm and confident, like she was giving orders in her own empire. Without hesitation, the journalists and the lawyer connected their devices to the large screen above the altar. The room went dark, and the screen flickered to life. The first clip appeared. It was of Lulena, sitting at a table in a dimly lit room, slipping a wad of cash into Niela's hands. The video was clear, and the message was undeniable. A bribe. The whispers started again, louder this time. What was this? What did it mean? Zubena didn't pause. She raised her hand again, and the screen switched to another clip. This time, it was Lulena in a different setting, sitting with a man, an unfamiliar face, giving him instructions. "Forge whatever you need. Make sure it looks real. No one can find out." Lulena's voice echoed through the room. The man nodded, and handed her a pile of documents. More gasps filled the air. The screen switched once more. This time, it was footage of Lulina, sitting in what appeared to be her private office, laughing with a group of people. The laughter echoed through the speakers as Lulina spoke clearly. "Faking my death, it's the perfect plan. They'll never see it coming." The room fell into stunned silence. The truth was out. Lulina hadn't been sick. She hadn't died. It had all been a carefully orchestrated lie to manipulate everyone around her. Aromo, Zubena, and even the public. Zubena's voice broke the silence. "This is the woman you trusted," she said, her eyes scanning the shocked faces in the room. "This is the woman who destroyed everything to get what she wanted. The woman who faked her death to push me aside." Aromo's face was pale, his eyes wide in disbelief. He had been betrayed, not by Zubena, but by his own mother. His world came crashing down as the pieces fell into place. Zubena looked at him, her gaze steady. "You may have thought you could control the story, but now the truth is out. You can't hide from this anymore." She turned, her heels clicking against the marble floor as she walked out, leaving the room in chaos, the truth hanging heavy in the air. The once lavish ballroom erupted into chaos. The murmurs that had filled the room now turned into shocked gasps, louder and more frantic as the reality of what had just unfolded began to settle in. Lulina, standing at the center of it all, was no longer the poised, untouchable matriarch she had once been. She was exposed, broken, betrayed, and trapped. Aromo, his face drained of color, turned slowly to his mother, the woman who had raised him with love and care, or so he had thought. His voice trembled with disbelief and fury as he confronted her. "You lied to me. You lied to the world." The words stung, echoing through the room like a sharp slap. Aromo had always believed his mother's perfection, but now, standing before him, Lulina's carefully constructed world had crumbled in front of his eyes. The woman, who had once seemed invincible, was now a mere shadow of herself, her lies unraveling one by one. Lulina's hands trembled, unable to hide the guilt and fear now coursing through her. The realization hit her like a cold wave. She had been caught. Her secrets were exposed for all to see. Before she could speak, the police officers moved in quickly. One officer grabbed her arm, slapping the cold handcuffs around her wrists with a harsh click. The sound sent a shiver through the crowd, confirming the inevitable. There was no escape for Lulina. Her reign of manipulation was over. As she was led away, Niela, who had been standing beside Aromo, bolted for the exit. Her eyes were wide with panic, but before she could make it very far, one of the officers grabbed her by the arm and stopped her in her tracks. She tried to struggle, but it was no use. She too was caught in the mess Lulina had created. Zubena, still standing at the front, watched the scene unfold before her. Her expression remained calm, almost detached, as though she had already won the war that had been waged against her. She slowly walked over to Lulina, her eyes never leaving her mother-in-law's face. There was no anger in her gaze, just an unspoken sense of justice. Zubena had fought to build her own empire, and now she was standing victorious. She looked directly into Lulina's eyes, her voice cold and clear. "You tried to kill my name. I built an empire instead." Those words, sharp and final, struck with precision. The woman who had tried to tear her down had failed. Zubena had emerged stronger, more powerful than ever, and now Lulina was left to face the consequences of her lies. The crowd watched in stunned silence as Lulina was escorted out of the room. The truth had shattered her, and all that remained was the painful echo of her own downfall. The room was now filled with whispers of disbelief, but one thing was certain: the power had shifted, and Zubena was the one who now held the reins. Weeks after the explosive wedding day that had left Ngariba City in shock, a new chapter began to unfold. The Bakari board met in secret, deliberating over who would take the helm of the Bakari Foundation, now that Lulina's treachery had been exposed for all to see. It didn't take long for them to reach a decision. Zubena was appointed as the new CEO. Her rise was nothing short of a revolution, one that stunned everyone who had doubted her. The girl who had been mocked and manipulated had now claimed the seat of power, and there was no turning back. Zubena, however, didn't let the title define her. She was no longer the naive woman who had walked into the Bakari mansion full of hopes and dreams. She had grown stronger, wiser, and more in control than anyone had ever imagined. The board's decision was a testament to her resilience, but Zubena still carried a heavy heart. The road to this victory had been paved with betrayal and heartbreak, and she wasn't ready to forgive everything so easily. When Aromo came to her, his face full of regret, asking for forgiveness, Zubena didn't hesitate to turn him away at first. Aromo, with his genuine remorse, pleaded with her, but Zubena stood firm. She had been hurt by his blind trust in his mother, his failure to see the truth until it was too late. However, Zubena was not without compassion. She had always believed in the power of love, but it had to be real, not tainted by what she had built. She finally relented, but only after one important condition. "You love me for real, not because of what I've built," she told him. It wasn't about the empire or the title anymore. It was about the person Aromo had come to be, and whether he could love her without ulterior motives. Meanwhile, Lulina faced the consequences of her actions. Her lies and manipulation had caught up with her, and she was now at the mercy of the law. The trial that followed was a spectacle in Ngariba City, where the public watched closely as the woman who had once been revered was torn apart in the courtroom. She was found guilty of her crimes and was left with nothing. No power, no influence, no legacy to speak of. As for Ngariba City, they would never forget the day the dead had returned to bury the wicked. Zubena's victory was not just about taking control of the Bakari Foundation. It was about showing everyone that the truth always rises to the surface, no matter how deeply buried it may be. Her story was one of resilience, courage, and the unwavering power of truth. And as Zubena stood tall in her new role, she knew that the crown she wore was not made of wealth or influence, but of the truth that had set her free. Truth, she realized, always walks taller than wealth. What an incredible journey Zubena had to endure: betrayal, heartache, and manipulation. But through it all, she triumphed with grace, resilience, and the undeniable power of truth. Her story is a reminder that no matter how deep the lies run, the truth will always rise. And no matter how many obstacles life throws our way, we have the strength to overcome them. Zubena's victory wasn't just about reclaiming her name. It was about showing the world that love, trust, and the courage to stand up for what's right will always lead to a brighter future. If Zubena's story has touched your heart, if it made you believe in the power of truth, and if it inspired you to never back down in the face of adversity, then please, take a moment to like this video and share it with those who need to hear this powerful message. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming, motivational stories that remind us all of the strength we hold inside. Your support means the world to us, and it helps us continue to share these life-changing tales with you. Thank you for being a part of this journey, and thank you for being part of a community that believes in resilience, love, and the power of truth. Stay strong, and remember, no matter the challenges, you too have the power to rise above.